Welcome back to Ben's Book Club. Today we are diving into the book Solar Trillions, 7 Market and Investment Opportunities in the Emerging Clean Energy Economy. I want to hook you right out of the gate with a truly staggering number, $35 trillion. You see, in his book, Silicon Valley entrepreneur and disruption theorist Tony Seba projected that by 2050, the world is going to spend an estimated $382 trillion on energy. And out of that giant pie, he predicted that solar energy and its adjacent tech would capture at least $35 trillion in direct market value. That's a massive shift. So what makes this explainer so fascinating is we're actually going to look back at these 2010 predictions today, and we'll see exactly how well they held up against reality. Section 1. The core thesis. Energy as technology. So picture this. Back in 2010, the idea of viewing clean energy as this unstoppable economic juggernaut was a pretty radical idea. We're talking before the big shale boom or mainstream battery storage. But Seba made a purely neutral economic argument. He said energy is shifting away from being a volatile resource extraction industry, and instead energy is actually becoming a technology. And because of things like Wright's Law, where costs drop by a fixed percentage every single time production volume doubles, solar is going to follow the exact same exponential cost reduction curves as microchips. What's absolutely brilliant here is how he framed the disruption. He called solar the PC or internet moment for the global power grid. This wasn't about, environmental altruism. It was about sheer technological inevitability. He introduced this concept called superpower. The idea is that once you actually build the solar infrastructure, generating that very next kilowatt hour of electricity costs basically zero. And that near zero marginal cost, well, that creates an abundance of cheap electricity that literally rewrites the rules for every other industry on the planet. Section 2. The 7 Solar Opportunities. In the book, Seba mapped out 7 distinct trillion-dollar market opportunities. The big takeaway for you here is that solar isn't just one single product or a standalone industry. It's a foundational platform. Much like how the internet enabled e-commerce and streaming, this solar platform enables overlapping, multi-trillion-dollar business models. We're talking everything from huge utility-scale desert power all the way down to hyper-localized smart grids. Zooming in on the top 3 projected markets, just look at the sheer scale of these numbers. Utility scale at $9 trillion, residential and commercial at $8.7 trillion, and industrial at $7.1 trillion. This really highlights a massive structural shift for us. We're moving away from centralized fossil fuel empires and shifting to completely new modes of power generation, where even everyday buildings are transformed into independent, revenue-generating assets. Now, diving into that industrial slice, Seba used a pretty wild metaphor. He framed data centers as the aluminum smelters of the digital age. Basically, they require massive, constant, industrial-scale energy draws. Whoever can provide that cheap, 24/7 solar and storage combo is perfectly positioned to win the foundational layer of our modern tech infrastructure. When you think about today's AI-driven energy demands, this framing from 2010 feels incredibly prescient, right? We also can't ignore the fascinating energy-water nexus. Seba identified a $1.5 trillion clean water opportunity, and he coined it bottled electricity. He actually warned that humanity would hit peak water before we hit peak oil. But here's the catch. Because desalination and water purification are fundamentally just energy problems, the near-zero marginal cost of abundant solar power becomes the ultimate solution to global water scarcity. It's like a giant puzzle, and cheap energy is the missing piece. Section 3. The retrospective scorecard. Okay, this is the fun part of the explainer. It's time to build a retrospective scorecard and grade these bold 2010 predictions against today's economic reality. Let's start with utility-scale solar, which he called desert power. We are giving this a grade of directionally right, but tech wrong. See, Seba absolutely nailed the massive scale. He pointed out that a 100 by 100 mile patch of desert could power all of America. But, even the best forecasters get the how wrong sometimes. He bet really heavily on concentrating solar power, which uses mirrors and heat as the winning tech. In reality, the manufacturing costs of standard photovoltaic, or PV, panels plummeted so fast that they completely crushed his favorite technology. Moving to residential and commercial solar, our grade here is a resounding nailed it. Seba called this power to the people, predicting that buildings would transition from just being energy consumers to actual energy producers and sellers. What sounded like a total fringe idea back in 2010 perfectly describes our reality today. rooftop solar, net metering policies, and virtual power plants, where networks of home batteries act together as one single utility, have become everyday, mainstream infrastructure. For energy storage, or energy in a box, the grade is the ultimate bottleneck unlocked. Seba accurately identified that legacy baseload plants waste massive amounts of off-peak power, and that a massive battery race was absolutely crucial to solve the intermittency of solar, making it a true 24/7 resource. Remember, he laid out this multi-trillion-dollar storage prediction years before the modern grid-scale battery boom or even the 2015 launch of the Tesla Powerwall. Now, what about island and village power? Well, we grade this as quietly successful. Seba pointed out that roughly 2 billion people were paying exorbitant rates for diesel or kerosene, or they just lacked grid access entirely. He predicted these markets would simply skip building expensive traditional power lines altogether. They would use solar to leapfrog legacy infrastructure, exactly like how developing nations skipped landlines and went straight to mobile phones. And he was spot on. Pay-as-you-go solar microgrids have spawned massive venture-backed unicorns in regions across Africa and South Asia. Finally, for the smart grid, which he dubbed Internet times 10, we kind of have to grade this as still in progress. Seba envisioned a highly digitized, two-way, software-driven grid acting sort of like an eBay or Airbnb marketplace for electricity, allowing peer-to-peer energy trading. And while we are definitely seeing the emergence of things like distributed energy resources and dynamic pricing, this incredibly complex, decentralized marketplace is really only just beginning to take shape. It hasn't fully materialized just yet. Section 4. The inevitable solar feature. So, why did so many traditional analysts get it so completely wrong back then? To understand that, we can look at behavioral economics, specifically the concept of status quo bias. Back in 2010, individuals, large institutions, and especially Wall Street investors clung tightly to their legacy fuel models. They were anchored to the present and heavily discounted the power of exponential tech cost curves. They resisted an economically superior technology simply due to inertia, failing to grasp just how incredibly fast manufacturing scaling can drive down costs. Which brings us to our final thought. The clean energy transition isn't just some environmental debate. It is quite literally one of the greatest wealth creation and technological shifts in human history. So the big question I want to leave you with today is this. If solar is an economic inevitability, what role do you want to play in that future? Because whether you're an investor, an entrepreneur, or just a curious learner, there is absolutely a place for you in this emerging economy. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.